Okay, let's unpack this. You've probably seen them, right?
Mhm.
Scrolling through social media, those videos, foreign vloggers, often in places like the Philippines,
Mhm.
showing, shock at poverty, and then these big staged acts of charity that get millions of views.
Right.
On the surface, they look like they're helping.
Yeah.
But it makes you wonder, doesn't it? Are they really helping, or is there something else going on? Did they actually save someone, or was
Yeah.
it more like trading dignity for ad revenue?
That's a really critical question. And what's fascinating here, or maybe disturbing, is how these feel-good stories often hide a pretty calculated business model.
A business model.
Yeah, it's a booming industry on YouTube. Our sources indicate that as of June 28, 2025, it's thriving. It basically turns real-life struggle into viral entertainment, and often without real consent from the people featured. So our deep dive today, we're going to try and expose some of those manipulative tactics, the ethical problems. We'll get into things like poverty porn and Pinoy baiting and show how the creators, well, they often benefit way more than the communities they say they're helping.
Absolutely. Yeah, today we're diving deep into some really fascinating material, stuff that really pulls back the curtain on what's happening. Our sources are excerpts from an article called "The Dark Truth Behind Filipino Poverty Vlogs," and it really unpacks this whole trend.
Mm-hmm.
And look, if you're like me, always looking for great information to understand the world better, you can find insights like these, by the way, when you visit places like Mind Expansion Daily.
Good tip.
Our mission here is really just to pull out the key nuggets of knowledge so you can get your head around this complex and honestly pretty uncomfortable issue. So let's start with the videos themselves. Our sources mentioned a kind of blueprint. What is that consistent structure these viral help videos seem to follow?
Yeah, there's definitely a pattern. It's disturbingly consistent, actually. It usually starts with finding a vulnerable subject, often a child, maybe an elderly person, or a family living in poverty.
Right.
And they're filmed in visibly dire conditions, really emphasizing the hardship. The real insight here, I think, is how these creators tap into our basic human instinct,
Yeah.
our desire to see heroism, to feel good by proxy.
Vicarious altruism, yeah.
Exactly. They've perfected this formula that turns complex suffering into a really simple story, a story where they are the hero, the savior figure. It gives the viewer a quick emotional hit, but it doesn't require any deeper thought about the actual systemic problems.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's not just cutting a camera,
Mm.
it's directing the scene.
Mhm.
How do they actually manipulate the interactions to get that emotional payoff you mentioned?
Well, the power dynamic is completely skewed, right? The vlogger controls everything. The story, the money, the exposure to potentially millions of people. And the interactions, they're often meticulously staged for maximum drama. You see the classic stuff, close-ups on teary eyes, sweeping shots of rundown homes to really hammer home the
Kind
contrast.
of music.
Oh, absolutely. Swelling, emotional music kicks in right when they hand over cash or groceries. The vlogger becomes the shining savior, and the Filipino person is cast as this grateful, helpless beneficiary. It's a performance, a carefully produced performance, not really a spontaneous act of kindness.
And the packaging around it, the titles and thumbnails, some are almost laughably formulaic, aren't they? But they must work.
They definitely work.
Things like, "I gave a homeless family a new house," or "Her reaction to her first real meal broke my heart," always with these really intense, tear-jerking thumbnails. It just screams entertainment, not serious activism or journalism.
And that raises a really important question, doesn't it? What are the long-term effects when someone's deeply personal struggles are turned into a global spectacle, especially without clear, informed consent?
Yeah, the consent issue seems huge.
It is. The sources really highlight the serious privacy and dignity concerns. People are filmed in extremely vulnerable states, sometimes maybe not fully understanding their image is going out to the whole world.
Like that example you mentioned.
Yeah, there was a poignant ex-post in 2025 from someone in Manila who said something like, "My neighbor's kid is on YouTube begging and we didn't even know." It just underscores how this whole thing prioritizes views and engagement over basic human dignity. Personal hardship becomes content.
That's powerful. And it connects directly to this term, poverty porn. Can you break that down for us? What exactly is it, and how has social media kind of supercharged it?
Poverty porn, it's a jarring term, yeah, but it's accurate. It describes media that exploits the circumstances of the poor, their vulnerability, mainly to generate sympathy. But that sympathy is then leveraged for profit or donations or most often now just views and clicks.
And social media just amplifies that effect.
Massively. The global reach, the speed of virality, it's the perfect breeding ground. The business model our sources point to is pretty straightforward. Find a sad story, film a dramatic intervention, a fix, and then cash in through YouTube's monetization system, which, by the way, reportedly paid out something like $30 billion globally to creators in 2024.
30 billion. Wow, just incredible numbers. And the sources mentioned specific examples, right? Like the hungry Syrian wanderer. What was the controversy there?
Right, Basil Manadil, the hungry Syrian wanderer. He faced quite a bit of criticism, notably from another vlogger, Doc Adam, an Australian vlogger, back in 2023.
Okay.
And that situation was significant because it really brought this shift into public focus. It highlighted how actions that look like selfless charity could actually be, well, calculated self-promotion, where the main person benefiting isn't the community, but the creator building their brand.
And that defense, they always use raising awareness.
Exactly. That often becomes the justification, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it can mask content that's really just about monetizing suffering.
So how do we tell the difference? When does raising awareness cross the line into exploitation, especially when there's money involved? That seems to be the tricky part.
It's the core dilemma, absolutely. And what this focus on raising awareness often does, according to our sources, is it overshadows the need for real, sustainable solutions. There was a concerning study in 2025 from the University of the Philippines.
What did it find?
It found that 60% of people featured in these poverty vlogs actually felt uncomfortable with how they were portrayed. And maybe even more alarming, 75% didn't have clear, explicit consent agreements.
75%. That's huge.
It is.
Yeah.
And this kind of content reinforces these really harmful, simplistic stereotypes, right? That people are just passively dependent, waiting for a foreigner to swoop in with cash. It completely ignores the complex systemic reasons for poverty, lack of opportunity, corruption, infrastructure issues.
It makes it seem like poverty is just a personal failing, easily fixed.
Precisely, which is a dangerous oversimplification. But it's important to contrast this, as the sources do, with Filipino creators like TPC NGA Pella. They apparently run charity drives that are unmonetized, specifically focused on preserving dignity over chasing profit. That offers a totally different model, a more ethical one.
That's a really important distinction to make. Okay, so that's poverty porn. But the sources also mention Pinoy baiting. What's that about? It sounds related but different.
It is related, but the focus shifts slightly. While poverty porn exploits hardship, Pinoy baiting specifically leverages Filipino culture itself to get views.
How does that work? Give me some examples.
You see it in titles like American React to Jollibee, or maybe I tried speaking Tagalog and Filipinos loved it, stuff like that. On the surface, it might even seem complimentary, like they're appreciating the culture.
Right, like they're celebrating it. So where's the harm? How does that become exploitative?
It taps into something called Pinoy pride. This is a real strong sense of national pride Filipinos feel when their culture, their food, their language gets global recognition.
Okay, I get that.
The problem comes when that recognition feels superficial, transactional. These videos often just boil down a really rich, diverse culture into simple reactions or stereotypes purely for clicks. The vlogger gets the views, the ad money, the subscribers. The audience gets a quick little feel-good hit. But there's rarely any genuine cultural exchange or deep understanding happening. It becomes a performance of appreciation, not actual appreciation.
And the sources pointed to Nas Daily Nusir Yasin as a major example of this controversy, right? What exactly happened there?
Yeah, the Nas Daily situation is a prime example of how even maybe well-intentioned cultural features can slide into what feels like exploitation for profit. In 2021, his Nas Academy platform faced a huge backlash in the Philippines.
Over what specifically?
They launched a course featuring Wang Od, the legendary Kalinga tattoo artist. But her grandniece came forward publicly, claiming the agreement was made without Wang Od's full informed consent, particularly given her age and language barrier.
Wow, okay.
Then the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples, the NCIP, they investigated. They reviewed the contract and declared it grossly onerous. This caused a massive public outcry. People were really upset. It led to the contract being nullified, and Nas Daily reportedly lost something like 200,000 followers in 2022 over it.
That's significant.
It really is. And as someone noted on X in 2025, something like Nas Daily's apology doesn't erase the exploitation. It just highlights these ongoing, urgent calls for genuine respect and accountability, especially when dealing with indigenous cultures and knowledge.
A really stark reminder.
Okay.
Okay, let's shift focus slightly to what's ultimately at stake here, the impact on the communities, the individuals being featured. A video might give someone food for a day, sure, but what about the lasting damage? What did the sources say about that?
Well, what's striking is how this type of content often completely misrepresents the causes of poverty, right? It frames it as an individual problem fixable with a handout. It ignores the bigger picture: lack of jobs, corruption, poor infrastructure, historical factors.
Simplifies everything.
Totally. And the personal cost is real. A 2025 survey by the Philippine Psychological Association found that 40%, 4 out of 10 filmed families, reported feeling social stigma afterwards, like within their own communities, because their most vulnerable moments were broadcast globally.
That's awful.
Yeah. And there's huge concern even brought up in a Senate hearing in 2024 about the kids. Children filmed who are too young to understand consent, now facing potentially a lifelong digital footprint defined by poverty.
That's heartbreaking to think about. And it must also pull attention and maybe even resources away from legitimate organizations doing long-term work, right? Like the Philippine Red Cross example.
Exactly. A vlogger's viral video gives this illusion of help, a quick fix, but it can easily overshadow the vital, ongoing work of established charities. The Philippine Red Cross, for instance, our sources say, served 1.2 million people in 2024. That's through sustainable, structured programs focused on community development, not just one-off filmed handouts.
A huge difference in approach and impact.
A huge difference. And it points to a larger trend. Public awareness about the ethics here is growing. There was that case in 2025, a Russian blogger arrested for live stream harassment. That apparently prompted Philippine authorities to start seriously looking at tighter regulations for online creators. It shows a growing pushback, a demand for dignity over clicks.
It seems clear then that vloggers aren't the only ones responsible here. We, the audience, play a pretty big role in keeping this whole machine going.
Absolutely.
These videos work because they tap into our desire for those simple, feel-good solutions. They let us feel like we've witnessed something good, maybe even participated just by watching, without having to actually grapple with the messy reality of systemic poverty.
And this raises a really interesting question for all of us as viewers, doesn't it?
Right.
Why are we drawn to content that gives us that temporary moral uplift, as one study called it, but doesn't necessarily lead to real action or understanding?
Was there data on that?
Yeah, a Nielsen study from 2025 found that 68% of viewers felt morally uplifted after watching poverty vlogs. 68%, but only 5%, actually went on to donate to related causes or get involved in any meaningful way.
Wow. That disparity is stark.
It really is.
And that's the real kicker, isn't it?
It is.
Our clicks, our views, our shares, that's the fuel. It tells YouTube's algorithm, more of this, please. And the algorithm rewards that sensationalism with ad revenue. What was the figure? About $15 per 1,000 views in 2025?
Roughly, yeah. That's what the sources suggest.
So what does it all mean? It means that our passive engagement, maybe completely unintentionally, is directly funding this cycle.
Right.
We create the demand, and the vloggers supply it. It's a machine that feeds itself.
It really is.
So the call to action here, based on what we've discussed, isn't necessarily stop caring. It's more like become a smarter viewer, be more critical. The next time one of those dramatic save videos pops up in your feed, maybe just pause for a second. Ask yourself, who's the real hero being presented here? Is it the person receiving aid, or is it the person holding the camera?
Good question to ask.
And does this video actually grapple with the complexity of poverty, or is it just selling a simplified fantasy that makes me feel good for a few minutes?
And the bigger picture here is that your choices as a viewer, they really can start to shift the narrative away from this kind of content.
How so?
Well, instead of rewarding these sensational videos with your views, maybe seek out and support ethical creators, those who prioritize dignity and real connection. Or perhaps even better, donate directly to established, reputable charities doing the long-term work on the ground.
Like Gawad Kalinga.
Like Gawad Kalinga, yeah. The sources mentioned they built 1,500 homes in 2024. That's sustainable, community-focused change, not just a performance for the camera. It's a fundamentally different approach.
So let's leave our listeners with this thought. Filipino poverty vlogs, they often sell a lie, don't they? A lie that charity is easy, that saviors are online personalities, and that deep-rooted poverty can just disappear with a single film donation.
It's a comforting lie, perhaps.
But the truth, as our sources reveal today, it's much messier. Exploitation can easily outweigh the aid, dignity gets trampled, systemic problems get completely misrepresented. As of June 28, 2025, this industry still seems tilted towards prioritizing profit over people.
It does.
So the final question for you, the listener, is, what does it really mean for us to demand respect over clicks? How do we look beyond the easy, feel-good answers and push for real, lasting change?